has 8 years left to achieve the goals it set itself in the National Development Plan, that's the NDP. Unfortunately, it's nowhere close to hitting the mark due to implementation issues. The National Planning Commission chair, that's the minister in the presidency, Mondli Gungubele, blames this on a lack of government capacity. Is it time for a bold new approach? Well, let's get the views of a development economist and the chairperson of Oxfam South Africa, Phelisa Nkomo, this afternoon. Ms. Nkomo, good afternoon. Thank you very much for your time on this Good Friday. The new National Planning Commission set up late last year has met and they briefed the media earlier this week. Basically, implementation still seems to be the main challenge that it's facing to achieve its very, very stretching goals outlined in the NDP. My view is that there's no problem with the goals, but maybe there's a problem in how we are going about it. Would you say it's time for a change, for more boldness in implementing NDP objectives?
I think there are several interventions, and thank you so much, Chairperson, for hosting me this afternoon. I think there are several interventions that are required for the NDP to be achieved. I think obviously the first one, there needs to be a current thinking in as far as whether the NDP is actually an appropriate plan to lift, South Africans who are trapped in poverty, unemployment, and social inequality. And one of the key reasons why NDP has actually not been able to meet its objective, partly is that it's the planning process within the public sector that, in fact, it ignores the existence of the NDP. It's not been able to integrate NDP into their annual plans. That's the first issue. Then the second issue, it's around contradictions in the planning process itself. NDP has a very longitudinal perspective in as far as its planning, and that's excellent because it's something that we've been looking for in South Africa for a long time. But the planning system within the government, right, is 1 year, and it's on a year, which is, officials expected to report within 1 year. And the second component is also the medium-term framework. But within that planning as well, the emphasis is more on quantitative reporting instead of qualitative reporting so that we can see the impact that we're making. So this is the first chunk of, the challenge that the NDP is confronted with. I think the second one, which I think in the diagnosis of the chair of the NPC makes it correctly, is the capacity of the state. Now, one of the key issues around the public officials we've seen over the years and what I call social evolution and the new demands that are emerging in society. Again, we've confronted with another mismatch and disconnect. So we've seen South Africa going through a rapid urbanization, right? Urban poverty, for example, is there in Gauteng, which actually, has 40% of South Africa's GDP, is confronted with massive urban poverty. Now, you can imagine what happens with other provinces that are actually contributing less than 10% of GDP. Now, what is happening is that, so the quantum of capacity that exists within public sector is not concomitant to the new emerging demands, right? So, for example, if you have a rapid urbanization, it means that you need to find a way of, in your planning system, to kind of push back that you can't control urbanization, but of course, there are certain interventions that you need to undertake. At the heart of it is that you need to be able to decentralize industrial activities so that you manage the urbanization.
Yeah,
so
decentralization. Sorry, Ms. Nkomo, I need to come in there. We don't have much time, unfortunately. We got to the KwaZulu-Natal flood situation. Government ministers on the ground. We may need to go live there shortly to one of our reporters. But then if those are the issues and you say the approach must change, can we draw lessons, for example, from the Western Marshall Plan that America undertook to help Europe rebuild after the Second World War? Or are there lessons from elsewhere that will be applicable for us? Very briefly, please, Ms. Nkomo.
Yes, I think there are several. I think the district development planning model it's kind of like giving, some form of signals of that decentralization in terms of the planning, right, on the ground. What obviously that planning needs to be concomitant to the resources that gets allocated. So there's a bigger also component of galvanization of citizens to buy into NDP, but at the same time is that you can't rely on public officials who may not have project management expertise or expertise that are required within the NDP to drive the NDP. So I'm not saying retrench public officials, I'm saying upskill them. You need to ask, if you look at the NDP right now, on each chapter, there are certain expertise that are required. Then the department that is meant to deliver those expertise, they must then say, do we have the sufficient expertise for us to deliver on this? And how do we upskill the official? Because at the heart of fail of NDP, besides the macroeconomic issues and the mismatch in relation to what it seeks to achieve, but at the heart of it is the planning and the internal state capacity. Warm bodies are there, but we must invest in the upskilling of it so that they can match what the NDP is actually seeking to achieve.
Makes sense, Ms. Nkomo. I wish we had more time. We will continue unpacking this because the NDP is still very much with us as a vision for the government for developing this country. Thank you very much for your time and enjoy the rest of your Easter weekend. That's Phelisa Nkomo, a development economist and chairperson of Oxfam South Africa, weighing in on just what the approach should be in finally bringing the National Development Plan to fruition.